Hello and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program 2. Today we're starting off with the launch of our KLEO tanker. If you watched the last episode, I made something similar, but my save game did kind of take a crap. KSP2 is an early access game. Your saves are not long for this world, no matter how clean you are about debris and stuff. But I felt like in my series, I had finally gotten to the point where I was like, oh, I can have a clear image of what I want going ahead. I'm not just like getting parts to get to the next thing. I can kind of decide what research I want to do, what path I want to go down. And I started, and then the save died. So my cursed starship is essentially a prototype of the KLEO class that I was going to be going forward with. Our first launch, we're coming around to our circularization burn. I think I'm low on battery, so I kind of jingle around. I activate my engines to get some power back, but Should start that burn now. I think we take it up to 100 right now, and then we circularize a little bit later. Like we increase our orbit. I think it ends up being like 120 by 120 or something close to that. Let's see. This was actually our second launch, so the first time I activated my engines on our KLEO ship, they burned up the solar panels because they were on, I guess the other axis. It was too close to the two engines and they just burned up. But right now, I'm attempting to re-land our first stage. I forgot to put a probe core on it, so I kind of just knocked it around and then activated the engine to what we would be retrograde. But that's our first launch. Our KLEO tanker is now in orbit. Again, this is the heaviest, so anything smaller than this should be good. Now, in the last episode, this was our tech tree. We had unlocked up to high altitude aviation, medium launchers, and our durable power systems. And then the things that I will be using in our proof of concept is nuclear propulsion, aviation utility, and aerial drones. And then from tier 3, I also unlocked deep space probes for the probe that is airplane shaped, and large power systems for our ISS style solar panels that go out, and then specialized docking so that our airplane could have integrated docking. It's part of the airplane shape, which I don't know why it didn't just come with the airplane parts. But this is the whole concept for going forwards in my season 1 campaign. We have our KLEO first stage in the middle here. I didn't do any stats on it because it changes between each of the payloads, but it's 4 skipper engines, 1 mainsail, and then 4 radially attached small, large solid fuel boosters. So on the left, starting at the bottom, we have our KLEO curls, the Kerbal return landing system, with a thrust to weight of 0.04. You can see it's not even half the weight of our tanker that we just launched. So this would be the airplane / space shuttle that we launch up to our probe mothership port. We dock it, we get whatever Kerbins we're returning, and then we slowly aerobrake through the atmosphere to get us our landing. On the middle right is the KLEO tanker we just launched. As you can see now, it does weigh the most out of all of these. And our next launch will be the KLEO PMP, which is the Probe Mothership Port, or the Payload Module Probe. I put Probe Mothership Port because this is the core of our space station we'll be using later. And I put Payload Module Probe. We don't launch this in this video, but we have the KLEO Mochi, which is the Module Orbital Core Habitat Integration. This was the big ship plan for missions for Kerbals to get at a certain altitude. This would be able to do harder landings. I just thought it was good to make a person habitat. I don't even think I added docking ports to it because I didn't like the concept that much. And then I made the churls, KHRLS, in the top left because I wanted a hydrogen system. And then after I made the first KLEO curls, I wanted something with a better thrust to weight ratio. So I made that. Ended up being a whole 0.1 stronger, but it's a big enough of a difference. And that's what I was going for. But now that we've gone over all of the classes, we'll be going into our second launch, which I believe is the PMP, KLEO PIMP, the Payload Module Probe. So this is essentially the same flight profile. We launch it, we circularize it, we get it to the right altitudes that we want, and then this one will be deploying. It's really just a core for docking things too. I just wanted something that felt unmanned and could be safe for a fuel depot. Here's our solid fuel booster separation. This one, I think I end up taking a little shallow. I'm launching too vertically, too fast. I should have waited until I was higher up in atmosphere, but it works out. Just coasting through space. And then we begin planning our circularization, which I think I do struggle with this one, getting it equal. But we get there. Now we're just waiting for our maneuver. Here we go. And that's our circularization. I think I left our other craft. I did end up leaving it at 100,000, I think. This one we took to 130 for now, but I think we end up raising it to 150. Now we're warping around to do our last circularization burn. Should be soon. There you go. I wanted the probe core to be higher in atmosphere because we do have very slow orbital decay, which is just you lose momentum over time. And I do end up taking this craft up to 130 orbital. I try to get it exact as possible, but you know how that works. Once we get circularized, and then once we have ourselves perfectly circular, we can begin deploying our port probe. Now, I said earlier, this is basically just a bunch of docking ports put together. I wanted it to be unmanned. So, here we go. A little RCS burst, I believe, to get us separated. And then it just floats out. This is the docking port for our starships going forward. You hypothetically would be able to connect 3 different tankers to this port and a landing system, which would be our curls or our mochi. But here we go. A nice little view of our brand new port. I guess it'd be a fuel port, fuel depot port, fuel core, something like that. But it's just its own little probe satellite. We do align it to the sun. I believe we are in the middle, but it's a nice view. So now let's get in control of our PIMP module and do our proof of concept landing. So in real life, Starship does fly like a space shuttle for a little bit. I think in this game, planning your landing to be vertical is probably more difficult than just coasting along your resistance like an airplane. But I wanted this to be reusable and land like a starship, even though it ends up landing like a space shuttle, as you'll see in a little bit. But I do think we are now beginning our air brake. Yep, and the numbers in the bottom left are changing rapidly. So we coast through the early stages of atmosphere. This helps our craft slow down. Usually you want to do a gradual one. So like you get to your 90, bring your other side down to 90, you bring it down to 80, you bring your other side down to 80, and it basically just means you spend the most time coasting through the thinnest part of the atmosphere, so you're getting the least thermal effects, I think is the word for it. We go for our last retrograde burn here. This is our last slowing. Everything before that was just trying to get us into the daylight, somewhere near the Kerbal Space Program. But now we're just waiting for our craft to finish aerobraking. I think in a little bit we do get some thermal effects. It should be coming up. Oh, I do some weird RCS burns to help slow ourselves down. I thought it would just help get rid of weight, honestly. And here's our thermal effects of re-entry. And at this point, for stability going sideways, I probably should have retracted our grid fins, but I like having them during any atmospheric reentry because it gives you so much more control. And airplanes and wings can be a little bit inconsistent. But here's what I was talking about. We do kind of like a space shuttle landing. We can't keep ourselves straight up, so I think here I accept it's just gonna land like a shuttle. We're an airplane now. So here we are just coasting in. Water landing is probably safer than trying to land back on the pad like a real starship would. I will admit I don't think I'm that good of a player to be able to land something exactly where I want to land it. But here we are, our vertical burns. This is just slowing us down, making sure our engine is in the right direction. As you can see, it was a little bit of a struggle to keep it in the correct orientation. But once we had our parachutes deployed, I was hoping it would help it. My RCS should be burning to keep me from falling any direction. I have myself locked straight up. We were going slow enough. I don't know. My craft was just wobbling. I don't think wind is a thing. But as you can see on our landing, we did end up using most of our fuel. So in order to be re-landing our KLEO modules, we would have to be refueling them in space. But that's our PMP landing. Now we are back with our tanker in space. We just need to name them real quick for when we're docking and rushing and trying to click stuff. We name one the true tanker. I was just going along. And then this one is our KLEO gateway. We begin. Our plan is to dock our tanker to our PMP module. The only reason I launched the tanker first was because that's kind of what they're doing in real life. They're launching the big heavy thing first, so later when they do payloads or, I don't know, something that needs less fuel, they know that their craft can handle the weight. Fixing our axial tilt, I believe. Yep. Our ascending node and descending node are moving around. We got them to 0, 0. So now we're planning our intersect with our PMP module. I am ahead, so I went ahead and cut it out. 13 minutes, I believe. I wrote it down, hold on. Yes, 13 minutes of me just spinning around trying to get behind the craft I was catching up to. I believe here we're doing just a couple of circularization burns, trying to get ourselves as high and close as possible so our actual approach burn is as small as possible. And there's a while of me struggling to plan and intersect with our target. I think I end up making like 2 other nodes. Now, in KSP1, when you're planning an intersect with an object, there's a button you can click that says skip orbit, which will automatically just like click through time. But right now I'm doing the dollar version of that, which is warping my time, moving it forward, warping my time, moving it forward, until we get as low a number as we can. As you can see, I gave up. And then we begin planning our new maneuver. I believe I start off just using this as a timer. And there's our planned intersect. You don't want to be below 300 because then your crafts are probably crashing into each other. So I try to keep our intersect 400. At least I can like move the craft, spin it around in case we're going to hit each other. But here I did actually drop the node and do a manual burn. I wanted to watch what was really happening instead of getting confused on what my planned what was happening was. But here we are in our final approach. This burn is to attempt to get our orbit speed as close together as possible. If you look to the left of the globe, you'll see it moving around. At this point, I'm not sure where I'm supposed to be retro burning. I don't know if it's anti-target or if it's regular retrograde or if it's like somewhere between the two to get me to exact 0 to our target. But here we are. This is about as close we're gonna get, about as slow as we're gonna get. And then from here, I do some RCS burns. This is where you can really play with it because RCS makes little tiny adjustments. So I found out like I was moving a little bit to the right. And then this is our final approach. Our RCS is burning us towards the gateway. This part, because our craft is so heavy, I'm trying to look at our prograde markers on our globe and our target markers. I'm trying to look at the craft and use our RCS to move us around. And then because our orbits were exactly not the same, I do this hard burn towards my target. This is just, I want to be intersecting with it quicker before we move too far apart. Still, we're doing all these tiny adjustments. You want your prograde to also be your target. As you can see, these white and green dots on my globe in the bottom left, I'm trying to get them as close as possible. I think I was encountering some kind of problem with the SAS because I'm not just moving around and I just start spinning out of control. So I don't think this is working as it's intended to at the moment. I don't think you're meant to wobble while you're making your docking adjustments. But we're on our final approach to the gateway. Our prograde and our target are looking good. I do a couple more adjustments. And then I think we end up doing the trick where you switch to the other craft. You set its target to you, and then it will be aligned to your docking port. So here we are on our final approach. Moving at 0.2 meters a second. I begin to panic because it looks like we're wobbling around each other quite a bit, but it's just me being nervous about our docking. I am already on approach, and there's a good distance of margin of error that the game has built in. So it'll just automatically lock once you get close enough. Like this. And that's our tanker and our mothership probe together. Just some nice views while we're in the daylight. And that was our tanker docking to our mothership. Now, our Kerbal return landing system. This is our space plane. It is meant basically for launching to moons and returning to Earth. Because moons have low gravity, they're a lot smaller. Something with this low of thrust to weight ratio should be able to handle it. And because the plane doesn't have much thrust to weight, it doesn't have as much fuel as the first stage, and it's a lot lighter, which means we'll have more fuel in our first stage. We want to get our curls module as far up as we can with our first stage, so that the curls module doesn't need to do all of that burning itself. It can save as much fuel as it can individually. Usually I would circularize around 100. This time I do it just above, and I left myself a margin for error in case I go too far, even though I think I end up having to do a small retrograde burn on one of these. But here we go, our circularization burn. As you can see, I do end up a little bit over on my apoapsis. It's at 140. I believe our PMP is at 130. So we drop that down a little bit. I think right now we're waiting for our exact apoapsis. So I can increase my periapsis as efficiently as possible. Now remember, our PMP is at 130. So I'm taking this airplane all the way up to 127. That my apoapsis currently is 127. So getting us as close as possible so that our airplane has to do the least amount of work. Oh, at this point, we go around for another circularization burn. We are trying to get as close as we can to our 130. Again, our airplane does not have that much fuel, and a lot of it is just for our jet engines, our methane. But there's our separation. Our space plane is now free. Right here, you'll watch me struggle trying to delete my debris. It's a long story. we were going the same exact speed, so it was hard to click on it instead of my current craft. But let's begin planning our intersect. At this point, I see that our lines are different, but our ascending node and our descending node, there's just so much UI that it's not popping up. And this is a common problem that I had with the whole thing. So at this point, I kind of just eyeball it. I look at where it looks like our line is intersecting, and then I do our burns as carefully as possible. We get it pretty close on this burn. I think we end up going around again. As you can see right now, I'm scanning our two lines for our ascending node and descending node. That time, I passed it up. I think I passed it up again. I think I passed it up 2 more times, actually. I just keep over warping our ascending nodes and descending nodes. But this time, I get it to 0, 0. I even do a little extra burn, which I think got it to the other side of 0, 0, but it's close enough. Don't know why this pauses here. I think I'm pausing to scream about how much pain I'm about to be in to get this intersect. And now I'm waiting for our current craft to be behind our target so we can burn towards it. You spin me right round, baby, right round. You spin me right round, baby, right round. When the right round, round. You spin my head right round, right round. When the right baby, right round, round, round. Because we're so close, my craft is going slightly faster because it is slightly closer to the planet. So because our apoapsises and our periapsises are so close, there's not a whole lot of gap being closed each rotation. So I didn't plan about that. As you can see here, we're finally getting close to our target. I do one last maneuver plan just to see if there's a better way to get our intersect. From the change between our two crafts each rotation, we were probably like 3,000 meters apart. But I get our intersect planned. I think with this one, I struggle again for a while. And then we finally get it. I warped us into our maneuver, pointed us at where that would be, what direction we need to burn. And then we manually do our burn once we're in the spot so that we can watch what's actually happening with our intersect. And then here we are. Our airplane, I don't think I had the correct amount of RCS in the front, but I was worried about on landing if the RCS would burn up. So we have, I believe, 4 one direction RCS in the front, and then in the back we have 4 directional RCS, which technically gives us enough, but you want control over your whole craft when all of my control is coming from the back. And I struggled with that for a while. I think I cut most of it out, but I struggled with that for a while. I just want my airplane to look good and go in space. And then for a while, the airplane and the PMP module, we kind of do a little dance around each other. I'm just trying to control where I'm going relative to where it is. You can see I'm skewing to the right here. And then I try to get us lined up perfectly. Like our docking ports are now facing each other perfectly. Just slowly RCSing around. I don't want to mess this up. I don't want to fly off in one direction. And then I flip the plane to be in the correct orientation that I wanted for docking. I kind of wanted the planes to be on the other side of the solar panels, so they were protected, quote unquote. I thought it would just look nice. As you can see, I'm doing tiny little dances around this docking port. But because we rotated to get the correct orientation relative to the craft, I messed up our alignment. So this should be the little last bit of burning. This should be the little last approach. And here we are docked. So we have our tanker module connected to our mothership probe, and then our Curls landing module connected to our mothership probe. And eventually, with potentially 3 starships attached to the mothership probe, this craft would be able to get anywhere. It would probably have a low thrust to weight ratio using just one engine in one direction, but it would get us basically anywhere. Getting a nice little view of everything docked together. And now we can do our proof of concept landing. So we detach the Curls module from the port. We do a little RCS burn to separate ourselves, and now we're preparing for our landing. We did a little electro burn here just to get us inside of the atmosphere, and then we put ourselves in aerobraking position, and we start to warp around. I warp to just before we enter atmosphere to get myself realigned. And then now that we're in atmosphere, I've slowed down our warp. So our periapsis is inside of the atmosphere, but our apoapsis is much higher. So we hope on our first pass we're just bringing down our apoapsis, because if we did anything more, we would probably have too much speed and burn up in altitude. Or burn up in re-entry. Once we get our apoapsis to where we want, I point ourselves prograde. Right now, we're just kind of coasting through atmosphere. We aren't braking as much as we would if we were standing straight up. Or I guess radial out, but it's straight up relative to the planet. Again, just coasting. I think at this point I'm hoping we will exit atmosphere so we can get another pass, but I'm watching our apoapsis and I don't think we're going to make it. So I think I make the decision to start hard aero braking sometime soon. Again, I think at this point I'm still hoping I'm going to make it back out of atmosphere. And I do, so we do our last little bit of aero braking. At this point, we're reapproaching atmosphere, so I align myself radial out / up, and I get the surface with the most drag. I do one last retro burn to get myself absolutely planned. I realized we weren't gonna make it to the light side, so I might as well be doing the slowing down now. Even though I was really, really wanting to do this landing in the light, I decided we were going too fast on re-entry, so we did those last little retro burns. So now we're doing our re-entry. This is a pretty hard re-entry. We're coming in pretty fast, but we're hitting the side with the most drag, so we should be slowing down as much as possible. And even though here my re-entry effects go away, I put myself prograde and I guess I gained more speed again. Because here we go. But that's basically our atmospheric reentry. Now we just have to worry about our landing. And at this point, I'm hoping we can make it back to the KSC. I'm just now realizing in this last recording, I should have retracted my air brakes. They are slowing me down while I'm trying to fly. But I don't think we had enough fuel to get back to the Kerbal Space Program. I think with maybe 3 or 4 test flights, I probably could have gotten it to the point where I landed back at the Kerbal Space Program, but I didn't see it happening for me. So at this point, I'm like, why am I not getting speed? Why am I slowing down so hardcore? Are these little tiny engines not doing enough? So I reactivated my regular Methalux burning engines. They ran out pretty quick. And you can see I'm just dead falling. I've stalled almost completely. We do some maneuvers, some trying to gain altitude, trying to gain speed. I kind of wiggle between them both. And then I'm like, this doesn't feel right. I don't know why I extended the solar panel. And then I noticed all of my engines were in reverse. So they were braking when I was trying to go forward. And that was the problem we had earlier. Now that I've activated my engines, you'll see we gain a lot more speed. They definitely... I don't know why the auto switch was on. Why would I want that? If I put the engine there, why would I want to be going backwards instead of forwards? But it's a function. I'm sure somebody has found a use for it. And at this point, I look at the map and I'm like, I don't know if we're going to make it. And then here's me thinking, like, does my craft have the fuel to make it back home? And I'm looking at how fast we're going through it, and I'm like, shit. So at this point, I decide we do a hard brake left, and we just try to land as soon as we can. I'm not going to make it to the KSC. I am coasting for a while. I really thought I had the resources to make it back to the KSC, but I think I quickly decide that I do not. Especially with the monopropellant being the only thing keeping me straight, I think at this point. So here we are on our final approach. I do this weird wiggle, braking to try to get myself aligned, to the flattest part of the beach here. I do this weird dip to bring myself down. At this point, the panic sets in. So for your landing, you want to be going actually kind of fast vertically, but you don't want to be having any up down speed. So I'll do this last burn on my approach. This is getting our vertical speed for our landing. And I would call that a successful landing. Nothing blew up. We'll just warp around today. Now the idea for our Curls craft was that it would be able to land on any of the moons from Val to the right and then Moho to the right. So not Duna, and then the eventual end game goal for this craft was landings, just landings on Lathe. But here we are on our moon launch. I, in the vehicle assembly building, removed some of the fuel just to simulate that we expended fuel on landing. But this is just proof of concept that this space plane could take off from multiple celestial bodies, mostly the moons, something with low atmosphere, but just a proof of concept that it could do it. And now we're waiting to reach our 70 apoapsis so that we can bring up our periapsis and circularize. That weird camera thing was us going over the North Pole. And here we are, circularizing. Now, this is the point in our proof of concept where we would go up, circularize, and then we'd wait a while, and then we'd dock back with the PMP. So this is just me proving that the plane can get to orbital docking height. I think for this one I do 100 by 100, but for the next two I do 150 by 150, just because other planets are scary. You want to have a bigger margin for error. And in the bottom right, you'll see we have plenty of fuel left. Now, this is our launch from Val. We weirdly lose one of our fins in the beginning. But this is one of the larger of the moons, actually. So this is slightly more gravity than Kerbin's Mun. And you can see we are burning a lot longer compared to the moon and all that stuff. Oh, this is Val. Okay. So we bring ourselves up to a nice apoapsis, and then we prepare for our circularization burn. We kind of burn until we get to our 150. Then we get to the other side, and we do another circularization burn. This would be our hypothetical docking height for the PMP module. And there you go, that's Val. And then, like I said, the final goal of this craft would be landing on a lathe. Lathe is basically Earth, but it's a moon above a gas giant. The one struggle of this flight is that I was always out of power. Do our little retro burn into Lathe's atmosphere. And then everywhere I looked, it said atmosphere started at 50,000, but I enter 50,000 and I'm not getting atmospheric drag, so I reduce it down again. But this is our circularization burn so that we can have a gradual entry and exit out of atmosphere. And now it's all just aerobraking. A beautiful view of, I believe, Jewel coming over the horizon. And then we did our retro burn just to bring down our speed. It was just making me a little nervous. Now our reentry effects. I do some hard monopropellant burning actually to help slow ourselves down a little bit. It doesn't make a whole lot of difference. I just wanted to lose a little bit of monopropellant weight because I had lost a little bit of fuel weight. And then now we're bringing ourselves down for our vertical landing. I do a hard brake to the left just because I didn't see any islands in front of me, but I saw them right next to me. And then I'm like, oh, I don't think I'm going to make those anyway. So at this point, I'm turning off my Methalox engines because Lathe does have oxygen, so we can use that for our oxygen engines. Or I guess our airplane engines. And here's our long battle of trying to level out, trying to get ourselves to go anywhere. So we start our approach to this island. I remembered to close my grid fins so that we would get some speed. As you can see, I get up to 217, I think it said there. But now we are slowing down a little bit. I'm just trying to get to the island. we do another just long coast towards this island. And then here we are on our final approach. I'm leaving my engines on for some vertical speed, but I do ultimately want to be losing speed, so I turn our engines down a bunch. So we should be mostly braking. And here we are landed. Thank you so much for watching my first series on YouTube. I wanted to do Kerbal Space Program because I'm a huge space nerd. But here we are. The final proof of concept for our Curls class and our KLEO line of rockets. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the series, leave a like. Consider subscribing if you want to see more. And I will see you in my next series. Bye-bye.